Hello, Clayton Embley from Bourbon Country. Rick Banner, a long time Rick from the Nutmeg State. Indeed. Steve Atkins on the East Coast. Ed Worley down in SoCal. Gordon Smith in Denmark. Ted Ryman, as usual, in Cape Town. Greg Phillips from the Gold Coast in Australia. Welcome to all of you from around the world for this show 597. We'll get it off the dock.
7,
Now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
James Frederick Bland, another sunny day in his paradise, which is Austin, Texas, ATX. Fritz Miller down in Miami. Hello, Fritz. You got the Bacardi Cup coming your way this upcoming week. Joe Holtzman is in Estes Park, Colorado. Alistair Murray, the president of Australian Sailing, saying goodbye from Metung, his batch, his weekend home out, what is it, Alistair, east of Melbourne, Australia, right? Hi, Chris Exley. And Ricardo Lobato from Rio de Janeiro down in Brazil. Our usual big global audience as we are live from Studio B here, the Beach Street Yacht Club in beautiful San Francisco. It's a nice day out. I've got the screen up so I can at least look out a little bit, bring a little natural light in here. Sorry to say no Julia again. She's on day, 13 or 14 of her little COVID bout, but she's doing pretty well. Tested positive again last night, so she's decided to take the day off. Hopefully next Tuesday she'll be over all this. And I can say thanks for all your kind thoughts about her, for her, and also my beloved mother who's down with COVID at age almost 90. She's got the Paxlovid. She's doing just fine too, so no big concerns, worries. For her, she seems to be handling it, and with the help, as I said, of Paxlovid. We're in the pre-start phase here. The Kohamarama Yacht Club in Auckland, New Zealand, a celebrated club, which is a youth yacht club dedicated to introducing young people to sailing and training them to love and excel at the sport. Big theme of this show today is clubs, classes, local sailing organizations, sailing centers, community sailing centers, yacht racing associations, groups of clubs in a given geographic area. We're going to talk a lot about clubs today and how that is the solution to lots of perceived and other problems. I want to thank our guest from Tuesday. Olivia Price was a fabulous guest telling us about her Australian Women's America's Cup Challenge and updating us a bit on her 49er FX Olympic campaign. Delighted to have her on. Her parents texted me afterwards and said that not only can I get her brother, Harry Price, to say more than a word or two when he does interviews, but she was bubbly and effervescent. She was just a terrific interview. Bravo Zulu, Olivia. Thank you for joining us on Tuesday's show, and indeed thanks to your entire family. And we'll be watching your brother Harry as he now is being ranked by any number of insiders as maybe not as quite on the top of the heap for the JJ, like Andu is, but he's now being ranked as with Rag and Famish as the number 2 team as they go. The racing started today, Friday. It's Saturday morning down there now. We'll be watching you, Harry, and wishing you good luck. He's a Fozy, and watching that fabulous series on Sydney Harbor as their summer is starting to wind down in Oz. Speaking of Oz, do you know what this is? News that we cover here in this first block. We cover news, sailing or other related. This is tangentially sailing related, courtesy of the BBC from a long time ago. Aboriginal spears taken by British explorer, sailor, yachtsman. Well, yachtsman's maybe a bit of a stretch, but navigator extraordinaire, Captain James Cook and his landing party when they first arrived in Oz in 1770 will be returned to the local Sydney clan. The 4 spears are believed to be the last remaining of dozens collected by the first colonialists. They're being kept at Cambridge University in the UK, and Cambridge's Trinity College has agreed to return them after a 20-year campaign by Indigenous people. So that's kind of cool news, I thought, to kick this off. This is also cool news. As you know, I'm not fond of the switching back and forth. and daylight savings time. And I'm pleased to report that the New York Times and others are reporting that the bill to make daylight savings here, what some of you, most of the rest of the world will call summertime, to make it permanent, it has reemerged from the dark. The Sunshine Protection Act, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida has reintroduced that. It had stalled in the House of our House of Representatives after it passed the Senate last year, but it's back. It's been reintroduced in the Senate. I hope it passes. I don't care if we stay on winter time or on normal time, standard time, or if we go on daylight time. I just don't like the switching back and forth, as most people don't. Polls here in this country, 70-80% of people say they don't want to do it. There's health issues, circadian rhythm, and on and on. I hope it passes, and I hope they let the states, and I'm sure they will, the states decide what they want to do. Already Arizona does its own thing. Indiana does its own thing. Hawaii does its own thing. And I'm a big believer, it'll also be a theme of the show today, of letting the local organizations do their thing with minimal guidance from on top. Suffice to say, lock the clock and ditch the switch. And I hope that's coming to a state near you, at least in the U.S. What day is today? You can see in the background, that's our first and really only clue. The numeral 3 has always been of special importance in Ireland. We read the show notes at the top of the show. We talked about the famously good yachting nation that's got celebrating their whiskey today, because the symbol of Ireland, the shamrock, has 3 leaves. The Irish flag contains those 3 color bars, green, white, and orange. And there are 3 types, I didn't know this, of Irish whiskey: single malt, single grain, and the uniquely Irish single pot still. Really? And on the 3rd, therefore those 3, the number 3, on the 3rd of March, 3-3, it has become the obvious choice of the date for their annual Irish Whiskey Day. This is a global international celebration. It also is exactly 2 weeks to the day before St. Patrick's Day, which is, of course, always on the 17th of March, making it a perfect time to raise awareness for International Irish Whiskey Day. So for the show that's a drinking show with a sailing habit, not really. Yeah, but we do want to celebrate this because a lot of you will, and they say, I don't know if it's true, but somebody here from San Francisco many, many years ago went over to Ireland, heard about Irish coffee, came back here, supposedly perfected at the Buena Vista Cafe. Julia, who's upstairs, not here with us today in the studio, but Julia and I like to go over to the Buena Vista Cafe and have an Irish coffee on St. Paddy's Day. Maybe we'll do that on Saturday, the 17th, 2 weeks hence. Okay, that gets us into the starting line. And as usual, we like to get the show off with a bang and get into the John Emmett. Before we get into this whole madness with U.S. sailing, to start it off with John Emmett. In the coach's corner, John Emmett is back in the UK. He's after his sojourn in Thailand. In fact, he's home in Weymouth and files this report.
Hi, Tom, Julia, and all the Fozy. Please remember to like the video, share it to your friends, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to be carrying on with TIFF, and F is for frequency. But before that, we're going to talk about motivation. Imagine you have 2 sailors, both of equal talent, but one is more motivated to train. Who in 2, 4, 6 years' time is likely to be the more successful? If you have 2 sailors who are ranked 10 out of 10 for natural talent, actually it's the highly motivated sailor who's going to be hard to beat. Just think about it. If they enjoy the training and they cannot get enough of the training and they just love being on the water, that's a very hard package to beat. And this motivation comes from deep inside, and it's something that you see from a young age. And that's why, you know, for a lot of us who make our living from our sport, we're very lucky to do so. And that motivation is a key part of the longevity. And that's why changing the types of sailing, the types of training we do, that can help with the motivation. But it is something. And you have to ask yourself, if you're going to go full-time sailing, are you keen to take the cover off every single morning? I don't mean when we're in 25 knots and 25 degrees or whatever is your golden condition. I mean, Can you go out when it's almost freezing, or there's no wind, or it's blowing small children away, it's so windy? So motivation, very important. Frequency is the F here, and it's very related to the intensity of the training and the type of training. So if you're doing very, very long, intense sessions, you can't do them that frequently. You do need to give yourself that opportunity to recover, and that's why you have a big picture. So you plan the whole year, so you know that you're going to be doing 10 regattas in the year. This is when you have your rest, because if you just do one regatta and one regatta and one regatta, you can get burnt out, and your sailing fitness may improve and your general fitness may go down, and then you've got the chance of illness and injury, probably especially spinal injury with sailing. And then if you just keep on doing training at home, you might get your big championship and you feel that you've been under-raced. So this frequency is really important, and it's very related to the time of training. And when we went back to our smarter goals, it's something you have to agree with everyone. So yeah, I think that's something I want us all to think about at the start of the 2023 season. And in the next show, I'm going to tell you John's 3-minute rule for success. Enjoy the show. Hope to see you later.
I thought that was TIFF, T-I-F-F. Isn't there one more F to go, John? Or maybe it's F-U. I don't know what it is. But I couldn't agree with him more. Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but when I was coaching hockey, youth hockey back in Ann Arbor, Michigan, you had kids with great skills, you had kids with so-so skills, but if you had kids of more or less equal skills, you wanted to choose the kid who was enthusiastic, had the great enthusiasm, the excitement, wanted to go, wanted to play, wanted to get better. And I couldn't agree more with John. Thank you, John, for that. That's the Coach's Corner. John Emmett Sailing, get to the front of the fleet. And we appreciate John very much. And he always likes to say, as he did there at the top of his video today, please share to your own Facebook and YouTube pages. Julie would say the same thing if she were here. And sadly, she's still upstairs in the Commodore's suite, and hopefully we'll have her back next Tuesday. Okay, if you are not keen, if you don't want to hear about this absolute madness, it is a fuster cluck of magnificent proportions here in the U.S. with our national governing body, our U.S. Sailing, and our national Olympic effort. If you don't want to hear about that, go away, get a coffee, tune us out, because we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about what's happened. And if this didn't follow up to the show on Tuesday where we broke some of that news, we're going to break some more today. And then my very simple prescription for how to fix things going forward. And we'll get into that here as we go forward. I got 4 kind of top of the segment themes, things we want to talk about. First of all, when in doubt, follow the money. And I've done that, and I'm going to tell you some things that will curl every hair on your body, perhaps, that is not already curled. The second point is that Albert Einstein, as you know, he's one of his famous quotes, apparently, I don't think this is apocryphal, but he said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The next point, Dennis Conner, with whom I did several America's Cup campaigns, arguably along with Buddy Melgus, the most successful sailor in this country, if not in the world, over the long haul. Dennis always said, and I think he was spot on, a sure bet, horse named self-interest is always running. And you have to keep that in mind when you're going forward on any organizational restructure, anything. Sure bet, the horse named self-interest is always running. In fact, if it's not, as John Emmett just said, if they're not motivated, if they're not enthusiastic, if their self-interest isn't rising to the occasion, forget about it. Now, their self-interest might overwhelm everyone else's interest, and you can't have that either. Finally, do you know who this gentleman is? Julia will know. She, I think, absolutely loves this guy, as do I. Malin Burnham, the patriarch of sailing in San Diego and beyond, one of the most successful sailors and the youngest winner of the Star Worlds in the history of the Star Class. Won it during World War II. He's still going strong at age 90-something 4. And I worked for him, ran the Cup with him back in 88, 92, both of which we won. And then I retired and ended up back working for Dennis. Malin retired in 95. We lost the cup. And had Malin stayed on, we would have, I'm sure we would have figured out how to raise money, help both Bill Koch and Dennis and so on, and we would have won the cup again. Although Russell Coots and the Kiwis were damn fast and damn fine in 95. Malin, I learned a lot from, and he always said, hire for strengths, then manage their weaknesses. Hire for strengths. Find the strongest, best people you can. None of us is perfect, least of all me, he said. And that's true of all of us, right? And then manage their weaknesses. And that's exactly what Malin did with me, and that's what I tried to do with everybody that's ever worked for me, whether at U.S. Sailing or in the America's Cup or back in the Ann Arbor Amateur Hockey Association way back when. Hire for strengths and then manage their weaknesses. Okay, the structure. I don't want to go into a long historical thing, but I've been involved in this aspect of it since the 1970s, when we had an organization in this country called NARU, North American Yacht Racing Union, which included us and Canada. All the clubs, the class associations, local sailing organizations called YRAs, Yacht Racing Associations, which are groups of clubs in, say, Lake Erie or in San Francisco Bay or in the Pacific Northwest. And they all got together and did things and did a lot of great stuff. Then the U.S. Olympic Committee, long story short, and now what is U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, USOPC, by an act of Congress, a couple acts of Congress, became designated as the overall amateur sports or Olympic sports body. They then had the power and the authority, but also the obligation to recognize NGBs, national governing bodies for each of the sports. And they were competing, in some cases, competing NGBs, such as the so-called AAU, Amateur Athletic Union, was running track and field, or athletics to many of you around the world, and swimming. And they say, you can't do that. We've got to have a swimming federation. We've got to have a track and field or an athletics federation. And by the way, our Olympic effort in those days, 50s, 60s, was really separate. Was quite separate. A lot of the same people involved, but they raised their own money through a foundation, and they helped the athletes, and Dick Stearns and some people before him, the late great Richard Stearns. And we were forced to bring Olympic under U.S. Sailing, and that worked fine. I was then the executive director, and we always had Sam Merrick and the others under U.S. Sailing, but I had a fence, a firewall between their budget, their activities. I hired a guy, Jonathan Harley, who was their he ended up going to work for Sam Merrick as his diligent and dedicated deputy. Sorry to use the alliteration. And Sam and others before and after him won a lot of medals, including our 84 effort in Long Beach and LA. We won a medal in every class. Never been replicated, probably never will. Okay, it's a different era. Totally agree. But I'm just giving you the structure. We have been all together under U.S. Sailing, what was then USYRU, since the mid-70s. In fact, NARU had to become USYRU so that the Canadians could go off and do their own thing. We were told by USOC, well, you can't also have Canada. So the CYA, which was one of these governing regional YRAs, went off as the governing body in Canada. A lot of the clubs still stayed with us in the local YRAs. Royal Canadian Yacht Club stayed with the clubs on Lake Ontario. Royal Vancouver Yacht Club and so on stayed with Seattle Yacht Club and the other clubs in the PNW, for example. And it's fine. They're affinity groups. They're groups of clubs doing cool things for the sport in their corner of the country. So U.S. Sailing's been in charge of the Olympic program. And by the way, those of you who are writing crazy stuff, so that we got to separate the Olympic program, take it out from underneath U.S. Sailing, it's not going to happen. USOPC is not going to let it happen. It's an act. It'll take an act of Congress for that to happen. Now, could somebody start the American Yacht Racing Association and then go apply to US Olympic and Paralympic, USOPC, and apply for the NGB status and displace U.S. Sailing? Sure. How long do you think that would take? How expensive do you think that would be? I mean, forget about 2028. We'd be in Brisbane and beyond. We'd be 32, 36, who knows? So forget about it. We got to fix the current organization, fix the current structure, but you're not going to pull the Olympics out from underneath U.S. sailing, nor should we. We should fix U.S. sailing. That's the first point I'm going to make here. Now, the U.S. sailing team, as I said, that was a creation of our Olympic Sailing Committee, and it was to put holy water on certain sailors, a few sailors. This was trying to replicate what's done in the UK, what's done in Australia with some success, with quite a bit of success. But what works in those countries isn't necessarily going to work here. Anointing 2 or 3 sailors and saying, now you go off and fight for being our Finn representative or our kiter or our, tell me, your 49er or 49er FX, tell me what, and then we'll give you a little bit of money, raise your own, go, we'll send some coaches. That might work for a country like Great Britain, some of the other European countries, arguably for Australia and New Zealand, and tell me who. Isn't going to work for the U.S. We are too big, we're too diverse, and this creation of this U.S. sailing team and anointing just a few sailors and then say, we'll pick one of you within the committee to go represent us, not going to work. And one of the things Caird has said he was going to do, which I fully support, was to open up the Olympic trials back to maybe not every Tom, Dick, and Harry and Julia and Janice could go sail in it, but you could apply, and if you'd been sailing in the nationals of that class or local fleet and doing something, anything, you could go into the trials. That's the way it used to be. I remember at the 470 trials back in the 70s, Bob and Mary Johnstone, yes, that Johnstone, Bob of J-Boats, and Mary, they showed up and sailed in the 470 Olympic trials. Did they have a snowball's chance of winning those trials? Not really, but he brought enthusiasm, he helped bring money, and then after whoever won, Dave Allman, I don't remember who it was, whoever won that, then we all got behind them, supported them, helped raise money for them. In some cases, went off and were their trial horse. And you had people like that all over the country going to the Olympic trials in those classes. And instead of having 1 or 2 or 3 boats, you had a 10, 15, 20 boats. You almost had a replication in some cases of the Olympics themselves at our trials. And you don't think that made people better? It did. So this whole U.S. sailing team concept, that needs a big rethink as well. Okay, historically, you all know who this is, at least those of you here in the U.S., and those of you in the Finn class, that is the celebrated Caleb Payne, a quiet, gentle giant of a guy from Southwest, not even San Diego Yacht, Southwestern Yacht Club, next door, down in Point Loma there, next door to San Diego Yacht Club. He is our only U.S. medalist since 2008. We had no medals in 2012. Caleb had a bronze medal in the Finn class in 2016. And of course, we had no medals in Tokyo 2021. So what's that all about? Well, let's read what Sail World, David Schmidt, had to say about it a couple years ago. If you follow U.S. Olympic sailing, you're aware that the last 2 games weren't kind to U.S. sailing interests. That's putting it politely. The American flag team suffered their first medal ceremony shutout at the London Olympics 2012 in Weymouth, and they followed this drubbing with a single, albeit hard fought, well, it was, bronze medal at the Rio Olympics 2016. To say these games represented a watershed moment for American sailing is a bit like saying that our country also held and defended the Old Mug, the America's Cup, for a couple of years. Yeah, this was a shock to the proverbial system. That's David Schmidt, who's the U.S. editor of Sail-World up in the Pacific Northwest, writing back in August of 2019. So the grand poobahs at U.S. Sailing said, we got to do something different. We're all screwed up here, and we got to go find somebody that knows how to win medals from one of the other countries. And they hired a terrific guy from Australia called Malcolm Page. Sorry, I couldn't remember your first name on Tuesday, Malcolm, but Mal lived here in the Bay Area. I got to know him. He was a terrific guy. He was hired by U.S. Sailing Association in 2016 after the debacle in Rio. And just a asterisk, a coda to what Caleb did in Rio. Caleb decided to do his own thing. He said, I'll raise my own, and he got some money from St. Francis, he got some money from U.S. Sailing, he got some coaching from the various people that the U.S. Sailing team provided. But he basically did his own thing. He said, I'll raise my own money, I'll do my own program, I'll do my own schedule, I'll find my own trial horse, He went outside the system, basically, and won a bronze medal. And, you know, you can talk about our kiter lady here, too, at St. Francis, who's basically outside the system. But then that's maybe because a lot of people don't know much about kiting. But Malcolm was hired, and how long did he last? Not very long. But another cool guy was hired. And I don't know if it was 2018-19 or 2018, early 2020, but Greg Fischer, we talked about him on the Tuesday show, terrific sailor, was heading the College of Charleston collegiate program. He was hired to be the quote-unquote COO and handle admin because the feeling was that Malcolm was overwhelmed. And it's a big job. There's no question. It's a big job. So he was hired. He didn't last very long. Greg, who I grew up sailing against in the Midwest, he from Ohio, and of course I from up in Michigan. Fischer will be working along, this is when he was hired, will be working alongside Malcolm Page, Chief of Olympic Sailing, and the leadership team at U.S. Sailing to assemble and leverage internal and external resources to prepare the Team USA to compete and excel at the highest levels of international competition, including the Olympic Games. Sounds like that word salad of a press release that U.S. Sailing put out last Friday night. Fischer will lead the administrative, operational, and business planning functions and will work to further develop U.S. Sailing centers of excellence, advance the Olympic development program, and drive stronger collaboration with college sailing. He will also support fundraising and marketing and communication activities. Gag me with a spoon. This guy is a coach. He's a sailor. Yes, he's probably a great organizer as well. He didn't get signed up to go do all of that stuff. And as soon as he did, we were all kind of cut and paste corporate speak. James Frederick Bland is saying in the comments, could not agree more. So, of course, after Malcolm got fired before the Tokyo Olympics, now I'll tell you why he got fired, and then Greg left, and this was all before Paul. Paul was hired just before the Tokyo Olympics. But why did they cut all those people? I mean, did they cut Malcolm? Because again, U.S. Sailing was in a huge budget crunch. So, okay, we're not going to do very well in Tokyo, so we're going to save money. We'll cut these people. We won't spend much. We won't send many coaches, and we'll just cut our losses. One hears, talk about following the money, that after Tokyo, U.S. Sailing sent a bill to a number of, if not all of the Olympic sailors that did make it to Tokyo in 2021. They sent them a bill for $15,000. Hey, you got to pay some money back into the system. What? Okay. I'm going to stop there and just go to comments. Steve Gerber saying, yeah, on a Thistle, I can count on one finger the number of times I beat him, meaning I'm sure Greg Fischer. Yeah, Greg and I raced against each other. And a terrific guy, gentle guy. Jay Rendell, we don't have a national funding source for Olympic teams like other countries. Yes, how true that is. Many U.S. teams have to raise their own funds. Absolutely right, Jay. By the way, I loved your comment here. I think it was on what I said on Tuesday. Ken Saban, everyone, welcome from the western end of Lake Erie. Raining and blowing the dogs off chains. Nasty. Okay, and Alistair Murray down in Australia saying, Malcolm Page, they don't come any better. Absolutely. Greg was indeed a great and is a great sailor. Joe Holtzman, remember, sailing against Greg, and I'm sure his dad, too. His dad, George, was a terrific sailor, lightning class, interlake class, and so on, and a gentleman. John Emmett, nothing, this is an interesting and key point, nothing is guaranteed at the Olympic Games, and that is what makes it so special. It would be a sad, sad day if sailing lost its Olympic status. Couldn't agree more, and that's going to be our topic in Corrector Crutonic. Okay, nobody will beat your Daniela Morose. Alistair is saying in Paris that there's a gold medal. Well, you say that, but the other people are coming on strong. So we got to be good. And hopefully, you know, the hope was that Paul was going to help her and others get to the podium, stay on the podium. Kayard was hired in March of 2021. We were all a bit surprised, but he did the study prior to the Tokyo Games. Remember, the Tokyo Games got postponed from 2020 to 2021 because of COVID. Paul, in the meantime, did a study with the help of McKinsey, the management consulting firm. And maybe he had in the back of his mind that he'd throw his hat in and do it, maybe not, but he did ultimately throw his hat in. He was hired. He went to Tokyo, looked at what was going on, came away saying, boy, we got to do better than this. came up with an ambitious plan, started raising money, and he raised a lot of money, 18 mil by all accounts. So that was, Paul was hired, and then a month later, that was in March of 2021, a month later, they had fired the previous CEO, who was a sailor, and they hired this guy, Alan Ostfield, because they thought they had to raise more money than what was being raised. Raise more money. We got expenses. We're short of money. So we're going to hire a guy that's an entertainment guy, non-sailor, has been president of the Detroit Pistons. Maybe he knows how to put a product on the court and raise money. Of course, we don't have butts in seats. We don't have a national or international television audience. This guy was going to come in and save sailing. How many times have we heard that before? I don't know the gentleman. I'm sure he's got a heart of gold, but he has failed miserably in only 2 years. So,
hi, I'm Alan Ostfield, CEO of U.S. Sailing. Just had my first sailing lesson here at Sail Newport. We took a J22 out. Had a great coach and Hall of Famer Betsy Allison, and Nancy and Carroll were with us, and it was a beautiful day on the water, and I learned how to sail, and who doesn't like sailing? It was beautiful out here.
Who doesn't like sailing? The non-sailing CEO said he learned how to sail in July of 2021 on a J22 at Sail Newport, with the beloved and esteemed Betsy Allison helping him learn how to sail. And that's condescending. Oh, you know, I've learned how to sail. Who doesn't like sailing? It's beautiful out here. Give me a break. When I saw that, and I've kept my mouth shut this whole time. Let you know, I'm a has-been. I'm 70, almost 70 years old. Yeah, I ran the place. Yeah, we won a bunch of medals. Yeah, we cleaned up offshore sailing when there was the big cheating fiasco in 81, 82. But this guy, again, I'm sure he's got a heart of gold. I'm sure he's very well intentioned. He thought he was going to come in and clean up a sport that needed to put a product on the field and needed to be professionalized and needed to have a strong staff and run it from the office and get rid of these pesky volunteers. That seems to be the attitude. Okay, before he got there, the previous executive director, CEO, who was fired, Jack Gearhart, who was fired before this guy was hired, the non-sailing CEO, hired this gal, who I hear was actually held the place together between Gearhart and when the non-sailing CEO showed up. But she was hired to raise money. They've been through like 5 development directors in the last 10 years. And there may be more than that in less time. I don't know. Jill Nosach was her name. I hear good things about her from any number of people. She came in, tried to hold the place together. She was hired as the CDO in October of 2020. So this is before KR. This is before the non-sailing CEO. And she left in November of 2022, claiming on her LinkedIn page that she raised more than $23 million in the first year in collaboration with leadership, volunteers, and staff to increase sailing participation and excellence through education, competition, and equal opportunity while upholding the principles of fair play, sportsmanship, and safety. Gag me with a spoon, a great big one, as John Coleus used to say. Paul Carroll raised $18 million, and Bill Rue, the chairman of the foundation, and a lot of others from names you all have heard, or those of you in the States anyway. And then the Siebel program, and she helped fulfill this stuff. She helped do the paperwork, which is important, but you know, it doesn't take a person being paid over $200,000 a year and a department of 5 people to do that. So she was the CDO. And as I said, I've heard from staff that she really did help keep the place together between Gearhart and the non-sailing, and when the non-sailing CEO was hired. But she didn't raise $23 million. Carroll raised, and Bill Rue raised 18 of that. And Tom Siebel, bless his heart, whom we know here, New York Yacht Club member now, famously good tech guy, a rich guy, put $5 million, pledged $5 million in the Siebel grant, the Siebel Sailing Program, provided they come up with a matching $5 million. You know how much they've come up with? $500,000 to match that Siebel thing. That thing is going away too. You don't hire chief development officers into our very small, very niche sport and expect them to raise that kind of money. And it's kind of amazing that Paul and Bill Rue, the chairman of the foundation, have raised the kind of money they already did. They've already done. Okay. Now look at the numbers. This is from the organization's 990. I dug this up. It's a public document. Dug this up earlier this week, and then somebody gave it to somebody I shared it with, I think, but it doesn't matter. Shared it with Sailing Anarchy, and it got posted. And of course, Sailing Anarchy made the snarky comment, everybody wants to know how much KARD is being paid. Well, that's not the point of this at all. KARD is probably being paid way less than he can make doing anything else, 180 plus 6,500 of some other, benefits. So call it 190, $6,000. And he's been making, I'm sure, a lot more than that for a lot longer. So it's a cut and pay, but that's not the point. Look at how much Jill Nosash, the chief development officer, was making. Look how much Alan Ostfield, the non-sailing CEO, is making, $200,000. Look, Heather Monison, who I also hear is a pretty good gal and kept the place together. You're not going to find, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So I'm not saying these people are overpaid. What I'm saying is that there are way too many people. And they've got now, not listed on here, 2 senior vice presidents. The CFO, I think, is gone. This CDO is gone. And they have a staff of 60 people. 60 people, more than, give or take. Depending upon how you count, there's some double, as I said on Tuesday's show. When I ran the play, it was a different time in the 80s. I had, give or take, 20 people. Do you think the membership has gone up by 3 times in that period? No, it's barely gone up at all. Do you think the revenues have gone up? Yeah, but so have the expenses. Do you think the net? We used to make a tidy little profit and keep the place alive. And I kept all of the USOC money, all of the money coming in from the foundation, as much as we could. We kept pushing it to the Olympic Committee. We fenced that off, let Sam Merrick and Jonathan Harley run their program. And their committee would come and meet at the same time as the other committees met, so people could wander into the room and hear what they were saying, ask the questions. Their proposals, their major points went to the board of directors. They were approved, basically rubber stamped by the board of directors, but not always. So it was under US, what was then YRU, USYRU. And the Olympic program was, always has been, and well, not at least since the mid-70s, and has to remain so. So any of you talking, it's Blue Fairy madness if you think you're going to take the Olympic program outside of the national governing body. Unless you form a new national governing body, and as I said at the top of this segment, and go wrestle the NGB status away from U.S. sailing at USOPC. Ain't gonna happen. Not anytime soon. So this is the U.S. Sailing's IRS filing. It's a public document. They're 990 from, I think it was fiscal year 2022. It's the only thing that makes sense, given the salaries and who that KARD's on there, and that Nosach is still on there, but she was gone in the latter part in November of 2022. So this is just all still by way of background. What has happened in the meantime? Well, as you all know, a week ago today, KARD quit. And some will say he got forced out, but no, he said he resigned. And it was, it was a combination. They didn't want him around any longer. They restructured his job, and he said, no, not going to do it. It's going to be my way or the highway. And they said, fine, it's the highway. And he resigned last Friday. And then on Tuesday's show, we told you that I told you 3, but there's actually 4 of the top coaches have also now quit. But here's the best, simple, straightforward reporting, unbiased reporting that I've seen of this whole situation. There's lots of people have written about it, and people have done podcasts about it, but this is the esteemed Bernie Wilson, who's been covering our sport for decades, and not a sailor, but he understands and knows the people, lives down in San Diego. He's a Fozy. He's been on the show I don't know how many times. Paul KARD, he said, he wrote on Saturday, I think it was. Paul KARD has resigned as executive director of the U.S. Olympic sailing team, the latest upheaval for a once dominant squad that has become an afterthought on the world stage. KARD, one of America's most successful sailors, said Saturday that he couldn't work under a restructuring of the Olympic team's management. He said he was told just minutes before a board of directors meeting that he would be asked to focus on fundraising while someone else ran the team. Exactly, you talk about insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. expecting different results. That's exactly what they did to Malcolm. Well, Malcolm, you go run the team. We'll get somebody else to run fundraising. And in fact, that was you can argue with that, what they really asked him to do. Kayard leaves less than a year and a half before the Paris Olympics, with the American team mired in an unfathomable slump that started long before he took over in March of 2021. This is the second time in less than 2 full Olympic cycles that a highly successful sailor has left the position. Kayard was hired March 2021 to replace Australian Malcolm Page, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist who was forced out after less than 3 years on the job. The United States has won just 1 medal in the last 3 Olympics, a bronze in 2016, as we just covered, and has been overtaken by Britain on the all-time sailing medals list. But wait, there's more. Bernie, terrific job. In March of 2021, this is a quote from Paul, I accept the position as head of the U.S. Olympic sailing team with the goal of getting Team USA back on the podium, unquote, Kayard said in a statement Saturday to the Associated Press. Quote, while this was my greatest challenge, I'm very proud of my team and what we achieved to date. Unfortunately, the current board of U.S. Sailing recently restructured the Olympic department, including my role as executive director. The new structure is not what I signed up for, nor something I am willing to be part of. I am not a quitter, but I do know when it is time to go. I am grateful to those who supported this mission with me. I wish our USA athletes great success, and I will always be there for them. Now, Bernie went on to say, Kayard said he raised $18 million since he was hired and was working to restructure the Olympic trials to reduce burdens on American sailors. In an email to the Associated Press, he wouldn't even talk to Bernie. U.S. Sailing Board President Rich Jepson said Kayard, quote, was offered the ability to, talk about corporate, more word salad, was offered the ability to continue to support the team by, among other things, providing valuable input into its direction and leading the important fundraising efforts. He declined, and we respect his decision. That, of course, Bernie Wilson writing for the Associated Press on the Kayard dismissal over the weekend. Now, Scuttlebutt came out after we told you on Tuesday, 1 here. Well, it turns out I was 3/4 correct. I mean, 3, I had the 4 of them actually quit, not the 3 I mentioned on the show on Tuesday that I heard were leaving. And Scuttlebutt ran this on the 28th. With the Paris 2024 Olympics less than 17 months away, the U.S. Olympic sailing program is in crisis mode. And for Craig Lewick to say that, he's generally very cautious when it comes to being critical of anything and anybody, including and especially U.S. sailing and world sailing. When the U.S. Sailing Board of Directors decided to restructure the team on February 24th, it led to the resignation of Paul Kayard, who was hired in March 2021 as the executive director of U.S. Olympic Sailing. Today, more resignations have followed, to wit. High performance coach James Line, hired by the team in May 2022, has quit. Performance director Leandro Spina, who has been credited for the success of the Olympic development program, has quit. Senior coach Luther Carpenter, the longest tenured and among the most successful coaches in Olympic history, has quit. And senior coach Charlie McKee, my longtime friend, 2-time Olympic medalist, who had previously been the program's high performance director and more recently has been working with the kites and skiffs, has quit. Scuttlebutt reported on, I guess, Wednesday this week. So Charlie McKee, the esteemed, the famously good sailor and good guy from up in Seattle, whom Stingray sailed with at University of Washington back in the day, the medalist turned coach, he put this statement out. The performance team in the Olympic department has been focused and united in our efforts to get our U.S. athletes to the top of our sport. I have been involved with Olympic sailing for 40 years as competitor, Olympian, and coach, and I am confident we were on the right track to help our athletes achieve their goals. I strongly believe in what we were all building together, especially our development of cooperative squad training and our dedicated athletes. I would also like to thank Paul Kayard. Well, that's nice, because when U.S. Sailing put their original statement out last Friday night. They didn't even mention Paul until I bitched about it on the show, or was it Tuesday, I guess, when I bitched about it on the show that there was not even a mention of Kayard in their statement. Their statement was amended and to include Paul's name. Big deal. I would also like to thank Paul Kayard for his inspired leadership. The athletes truly felt and appreciated his vision and support of them, not just professionally, but also personally. The quote from Charlie McKee. Now look, Kayard's not perfect. I said that on the show on Tuesday. None of us is perfect, least of all me. But what Malin said was right. You hire people for their strengths, the great strengths, and then you manage their weaknesses. Kayard's got weaknesses. We all do. But he's got tremendous strengths. Bill Rue, the chairman of the foundation, I don't know him. I do, but barely. He's got great strengths. He's got weaknesses too. None of them is perfect. So you get a team together, and then if you are the CEO of the organization, your job is to keep everybody, shared vision, shared values, keep everybody on the same track. When somebody has a weakness, you buck them up. You don't go in and upend the whole organization every 2 years because you don't like the cut of somebody's proverbial jib, which is what the non-sailing CEO thinks he needed to do along with his board who bought it. The board is Rich Jepson, the president, here from the Bay Area. I don't know him well, nice guy. Marie Rogers, whom nobody seems to know, was a past Commodore of the LA Yacht Club, who seems to be more involved in DEI and much less to do with yacht racing or sailing. I'm not going to go into any of the rest of these people. I know all of them or met all of them. Stan Honey there, one of the smartest people in the sport, is a director. He's apparently declined to go on and be president, although a number of people have asked him to be president. Got another 8 people. It's 16 people on the board, counting the non-sailing CEO down there in the lower right corner. All smart people, all decent people, all well-intentioned people, but they're on the wrong mission. The organization is completely off the tracks. These people largely inherited the organization. The CEO has then, as if anything, sped the train up on this other track. They're no longer a racing organization. They're barely a sailing organization. They have turned into a DEI, delivery organization. And if you don't know what DEI is, well, you all do. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Leave that to other organizations. We need to service sailors and service racing sailors. We need DEI. We need diversity. We need inclusion. The clubs are way better at providing that. The local sailing organizations, Sail Newport, and all the other great community sailing organizations. U.S. Sailing can talk about that till the cows come home, and they'll have virtually zero impact on it. Talk is cheap, and the board needs to realize that, including and especially the president, who again is a nice guy. I've never had anything but pleasant words with the president, with Rich Jepson, here from the Bay Area. He's ran a sailing school in the East Bay for a long, long time and thinks U.S. Sailing should be about supporting sailing schools and DEI. Sorry, that's where we got off track. Way before any of these people were involved. So you can't blame them. They're just keeping the train, and in fact have sped. They poured on the coals and sped the train up, and it's going completely in the wrong direction. And this guy has only added fuel to the proverbial fire. This guy has to go. He does not know what he doesn't know. He doesn't know who to call. He doesn't know who to consult with, only his board. And he's the non-sailing CEO, and he's got to go. And as soon as you get rid of him, get somebody in there who knows what they're doing, then they can start to repair the U.S. sailing team. Now, who would I get? I'd start by looking at good young, meaning younger than I, people who are running nonprofits, who are keen, active, successful racing sailors who are doing a good job running those nonprofits. And I would start with, I'm going to name them, with Don Riley, with Billy Lynn. Don Riley, of course, running Oak Cliff. Bill Lynn, who's running the Harrishoff Marine Museum and America's Cup Hall of Fame. Brad Reed, who's running Sail Newport. And you could go around and name others all around the country. You probably better than I. You get a current active racing sailor who knows the organization, knows the culture, knows the sport, knows the pitfalls, and comes in and runs the place. The way Harry Anderson did before me, the way I did, 24-year-old wet behind the ears with the support of a lot of volunteers, went in there, cleaned the place up, the way the late, great John Bonds did, the way the late, great Charlie Layton came in and cleaned the place up again. He was a former New York Yacht Club Commodore. Commodore Layton is gone now, but these people were seriously good executive directors of the sport. The other thing that has changed is that the sport used to be all about volunteer. I got a long list. I'm not going to cover it all, but it was volunteer run. I was the COO, not the CEO. I didn't tell the executive committee and the president what to do. Sometimes, as I said on Tuesday, when I banged my shoe, John Bonds would go in. I remember him saying, we got to do this, we got to do that. But at the end of the day, the volunteers ran the place, made the decisions, including just about everything. It was training, sailing, Olympics. The volunteers ran it and ran it well. Now the staff runs it. A staff of give or take 60 up in Bristol with a huge budget. I think it's a $15 million budget, give or take. And you know what? They're trying to take money out of the Olympic program because their general fund, the G&A budget, is underwater. Again, follow the money. You know what really caused this rift between the non-sailing CEO and Kayard? What caused this big S fight at the board meeting that everybody, Bernie Wilson, refers to? You know what it was? Talk about following the money. The non-sailing CEO decided to invoice the Olympic department $976,000 for the services that the G&A, the general administrative part of U.S. Sailing, was providing to the U.S. Sailing team. And when I heard that number, the person that told me, I said, $976,000 over the quad, over the 4 years. So, you know, that's just shy of $1 million, $250,000 a year. You know, I could kind of get my arms around that. $250,000 for, you know, writing press releases and, you know, insurance and accounting and God knows what else. No, $976,000 per year. $4 million out of the U.S. Sailing team, the Olympic fund, to help support the general purposes of U.S. Sailing because they're short. And of course, the non-sailing CEO is bonus based on, in part, his budget performance. So he decided he was going to invoice U.S. Sailing, and you can, you know, all of you have done this. You can allocate some whatever you want to what departments, and you can say, well, I'm going to, you know, I got some money over here, so I'm going to allocate more of my overhead over here than. But to build the Olympic Committee, almost $1 million per year for overhead. So Kayard won hears. Kayard didn't, you know, I haven't talked to Kayard. I've texted with him. I've had some communication with him, but I've also talked to lots and lots of other people. And thank you to all of you watching who've called in with advice, with information. And I keep my sources and my own powder dry, and yours. $1 million a year. And Kayard said, you can't possibly do that. It used to be half that or less that they were sending from the Olympic fund over to general purposes for their admin, for the overhead. Half that, less than half that. And Paul said, no way. You're not going to do that. And if you're going to do that, I'm out of here. And they said, no, we got to have that, $976,000. Follow the money. And he said, I'm out of here. You're not going to take that money out of my budget and out of the hands of the Olympic sailors whom we're trying to raise money for and support and try to rebuild this effort, whether it's the Leandro Spina grassroots development effort, which is going quite well, whether it's the current top medal prospects and all the coaches. Absolutely crutonic. Now, look, we had to fix this organization, and I'm going to give you my quick prescription in a moment. But the other thing we have to do is support the current sailors. You're going to find a lot of people are calling for a boycott, and I'm not going to okay, everybody, it's a personal decision. You make your own decision because the membership is falling. The revenues are falling. The staff is rising. The expenses are rising. With inflation and God knows everything else, it's terrible. I heard from one board member, now a former board member, in fact, maybe still on the board, I can't remember, when COVID came and they applied for personal, what was the payroll protection, PPE. Was that right? Payroll protection, PPP, payroll protection program. And they had a big discussion at the board level. You know what we probably better do is get this PPP, save all the cash, protect our cash, take the staff, take the staff down. What are we going to do for a year or two while we fight this blood, or 3, while we fight COVID? And then rethink the organization. We'll have a pile of cash and we'll know what to do with it. Guess what? Didn't do it. Cut people's salary a little bit and then repaid them what they'd been cut. Use the PPP like a lot of organizations did just to line their own pockets. Unbelievable. I'm going to rejoin U.S. Sailing. I'm not going to bitch about it. I am going to bitch about it, but I'm not going to bitch about it and not also support it. I'm going to rejoin. I haven't been a member for a year or so. Apparently the price has gone up. I don't know what it is, $50, $100. But I'm going to rejoin and support it just so that I can be true and honest here and say that we need the organization. We need the Olympic program under the organization, but we've got to change the organization. And to summarize that, I can't do it any better than our longtime friend, Bill Canfield, Taylor's dad, president of the Virgin Islands Sailing Association, who wrote this I think it was in Scuttlebutt last night. Malcolm Page, Greg Fischer, and Paul Caillard, 3 very qualified individuals, have all failed working with U.S. Sailing's Olympic program, and all had very short tenures. None were able to even last an Olympic full cycle, even the shortened one. One must wonder, quote, what the hell's going on over there, meaning at U.S. Sailing, unquote. 2 questions must be asked. Who will sign on to work with this organization in the future, but more importantly, who will donate to the Olympic sailing program at this point in time? I would have to guess those that helped out the past 6 years must be getting quite disappointed, as funding seems to be wasted and no progress being made in the quest for a return to past greatness. Paul's very harsh but honest words were pretty damning toward U.S. Sailing's current management structure. Their weak statement on dividing up the roles with a dedicated fundraiser was actually already in place, with Bill Rue doing quite a bit of the fundraising working with Paul. I don't believe that is why Caillard resigned. Well, you were right, Bill Canfield. I just told you why. Let's do what we can for our current medal hopefuls so their time and efforts are not wasted on a very sad situation that exists within U.S. Sailing. And I totally agree, and I pledge my support here. If there are any Olympians that need to come on, as we've done in previous quads, need to come on, be our guest here on the show, help you raise money. Several of you have come on and promoted them to us and helped raise money because it's almost always a local effort. You guys up in Minnesota have done a great job up there. People in and around San Francisco Bay and St. Francis Yacht Club have done a terrific job. Those sailors need our support more than ever, and we need to support the U.S. sailing team. And I'm going to. And by the way, guess what Caillard was doing last night? One of you sent me a note saying, hey, I hear they're doing a thing about the Olympics at Annapolis Yacht Club last night to do a fundraising. Well, they were. Caillard and Jepson helping the Annapolis Yacht Club Foundation raise money for their local Olympians. And their promo was Chesapeake Station. Join fellow sailors from clubs and programs around the Chesapeake Bay to hear firsthand what it takes to compete at the highest level. The AYC Foundation is hosting a series of events on March 2nd, last night, at Annapolis Yacht Club, featuring Caillard, Jepson, and 3 aspiring Olympic sailors from the Chesapeake Bay area, Leo Boucher, Casey Cabot, and James Golden. This is the first time the area has produced 3 Olympic contenders at the same time. Bravo frigging Zulu, Annapolis Yacht Club, Chesapeake Bay. Fantastic stuff. That happened last night. Caillard was there last night. How do I know? Because I heard from people who were there. And I texted Paul. I said, did you go to Annapolis Yacht Club? Did you do that gig last night? Yeah, I did. I texted him. It was late at night. It was midnight his time, 9 o'clock my time. He said, yeah, I was there. Bravo Zulu, Paul. You know who else was there? T. Hutch. Terry Hutchinson flew up from Pensacola, went to that event, and I believe, one hears, he was also there. Nice job, Terry. That's what it takes. That's what it needs. Racing sailors supporting other racing sailors. And we can talk about whether it's worthwhile. We're going to in a minute for the Olympics and our sport. But U.S. Sailing which used to be, I'm going to say it one more time, and it's not the last time. U.S. Sailing used to be a racing organization. Sailors in this country don't need much of anything that the clubs, classes, YRAs, the local sailing organization can't do and already do better. Safety at sea, Storm Trysail, CCA, other local organizations. Race management, racing rules, that needs to come and be coordinated by the national governing body, by U.S. Yacht Racing Union, by the American Yacht Racing Association, the American Sail Racing, call it what you want. They need to do three things: rules and rules enforcement, meaning the racing rules and judges. And you don't even, this idea of certifying race officers is another one of these financial, oh, let's get revenue in, because they used to say, well, become a certified race officer and then you'll get liability insurance on the back of our, as a rider on our U.S. sailing insurance policy. They don't even do that anymore. They cut that, I'm told, reliably by race officers. We don't need to certify race officers. Do train. You know what? We just at St. Francis, and I don't know why we didn't hire somebody from the U.S., but they just hired a guy from Germany, from Hamburg and Kiel, and the guy's been running Kiel Race Week, Kieler Volcano, for years. A guy called Felix Wielding, and he's been hired by St. Francis because St. Francis has, got 300 days a year on the water, or some large number of days, and they need a guy that can really come over here and dig into this. And you're going to certify him? Excuse me. Clubs can train their own race committees and their own race management stuff and do a better job of it than U.S. Sailing can. Yeah, send in coordination and say, here's how we do it in Chesapeake Bay, and this is the way we do it in Texas, and this is the way we do it in the Great Lakes. Everybody compare notes. And then take the best practices back to your club. Or say, hey, that works great on the relatively shallow lakes in southern Illinois, but it isn't going to work at all in San Francisco Bay where we got 3 knots of current, for example. And that was the beauty and strength of U.S. Sailing when it was a racing organization and it provided ratings. It was an offshore ratings organization, and it ran the competition department, was a few national championships and the Olympic program. That was it. The clubs, the classes, the LSOs, local sailing organizations, the YRAs, handled the rest and did it better, I assert, than what U.S. Sailing now does. Do you think New York Yacht Club goes to U.S. Sailing and says, hey, tell us how to run the Invitational Cup? Do you think St. Francis Yacht Club goes to U.S. Sailing and say, tell us how to run the Big Boat Series? Do you think the CYCA goes to Alistair Murray and Sailing Australia and says, hey, how do we run the Sydney Hobart? No. Nor should they. You think Chicago Yacht Club goes to U.S. Sailing and says, tell us how to run Chicago? Yeah, they get guidance. There are the international regs. And if there's a disaster, if there's a tragedy, they'll bring in a panel of people that U.S. Sailing will help coordinate, as they should, to do an investigation and then promulgate best practices out of that. But do you think, for example, this rescue swimmer program, which seems to be growing like topsy, John Schaefer, our Fozy, do you think that came out of U.S. Sailing? No. Do you think? Look, that's what U.S. Sailing needs to do. Promulgate the Royal Yachting Association. Do you think the RYA runs offshore sailing in the UK? No. The RORC does, a separate organization. It's a club, the Royal Ocean Racing Club. It's a yacht club. It's a sailing club. You join the RORC as a member. They promulgate rating rules. They enforce the rating rules. They do the measurement, not the RYA. U.S. Sailing needs to pare down, go back to 20 people, give or take, redefine their mission, redefine their goals, get people to come on the board that are interested in supporting that mission and those goals. And that is the triumvirate, the three things: the racing rules, the rating rules, because I don't see anybody else is going to do it in this country at this point, and the Olympics. That's it. Okay, we're an hour and 5 minutes into this, and I'm getting tired, and you're probably getting tired of it too. Now, I brought up this day in history. You'll see why after I do it, because it's also apropos everything we've been talking about. Do you know what happened on this day in history in 2003? And the terrific impact that has had on sailing, youth sailing, and more in one particular country. Here's your first clue, and only clue. You know who that is? 2003. You will all know who that is. My God, the comments are flowing in here. I will go back to the comments. Emmett is saying just copy the RYA model. John, the RYA model will not work in the U.S. But yes, Stingray, Alinghi won. Ed Worley, Alinghi won the cup. Ernesto, Gordon Smith, yeah, you've all got that. And that was Ernesto and Alinghi winning the cup. Russell Coots, Brad Butterworth, 03, 20 years ago. This month, yesterday, it was on the 2nd of March 2003. Alinghi made history. Watch.
If you ask me if we can win the cup as a new team for the first time, I'm going to say yes, as much as we did back then.
The win in Auckland 20 years ago mean a lot to Switzerland. We won the biggest sport in the history and the oldest trophy.
You often wish that time slowed down a little bit to absorb absolutely everything of it. But that's the beauty of these sort of things which last for a moment. You know, they're beautiful because they're not forever.
It was just amazing seeing 30,000 Swiss people cheering with Swiss flag. It showed us how big the event was.
That's one of the reasons why I like to win again.
Okay, Julie Aarons, if you're on, you're going to say, well, he's not going to win. Don't worry, Tom. I think the guy's got as good a chance as anybody else. I'm hearing good things about what's coming out of Pensacola. I hope T. Hutch and American Magic are really spruced up and are really strong and good this time. By the way, American Magic has a new logo. It's a terrific logo. We'll talk about that, but it's also interesting and perhaps revealing that it was, for a while, it was Quantum Racing American Magic. Quantum Racing seems to have disappeared from that name. It's now just New York Yacht Clubs in kind of smaller type. American Magic with a good, strong logo. We'll talk about that on Tuesday. But I digress. Alinghi won the Cup, AC31, in 2003. And this adventure, according to Alinghi, was the catalyst for the Alinghi generation. Young people enrolled in sailing schools across the country, and some of them are now members of the Alinghi Red Bull Racing sailing team. Quote, I remember watching the final race of the match at the Société Nautique Genève with my friends, unquote, said Alinghi Red Bull Racing skipper Arnaud Safaragas. I was, quote continues, I was 14 years old, and that was the moment that I decided I wanted to participate in the America's Cup with the Swiss America's Cup winning team, Alinghi. Competition, more than anything else, is what inspires kids to go into a sport, whether it's as a recreational sport or a competitive sport. Why did golf boom in 10 to 20 years ago? Because of Tiger Woods. And not just black kids, not just everybody got fired up because of Tiger Woods. Why is the NBA? It's because of Steph Curry. It's because of all these great. Why did baseball boom? It was because of Babe Ruth. Everybody wanted to get their glove and get their jockstrap on and go down to the sandlot and play baseball. It's competition that gets people excited about a sport. U.S. Sailing can go on about DEI and about promoting the sport with this, that, and the other thing. If U.S. Sailing puts a good Olympic team on the field, on the water, if American, and I said this at a recent 2, 3, 4 years ago, one of these forums that U.S. Sailing ran down in San Diego, if American Magic puts a good team on the field, if they do well in the next America's Cup, that will inspire more people to take up sailing than anything we can do. The 60s boom, yeah, it was fiberglass, it was Dacron, it was a little bit of the getting out of the wood and the maintenance stuff, but it was Jackie Kennedy and JFK going out on a sailfish and being pictured, being photographed, and then on the cover of Look magazine and Life magazine and Saturday Evening Post, week after week. Sailing! Oh, that looks cool, let's do that. You think U.S., what was then, Nehru could have pulled that off? No way. Put a good Olympic team on the water, promote those heroes, those sailors, and you'll do more for the sport than anything you can do in Bristol at the office with DEI and with local. The clubs, classes, and YRAs, LSOs do more for all of that, I assert. So NBA, James Frederick Bland is saying is people of color. Well, so what? NHL is 90% white. I don't care. They still inspire kids of all races, of all walks of life. And I don't know, I know some sailors who are racist. I know some sailors, very few, who don't like Jewish people or don't like gay people, but it's precious few. I think most sailors are pretty smart, are pretty worldly, and they don't care if you are red, white, black, yellow, or green, gay, straight, even if you're from New Zealand, we like you. We don't care where you're from. We don't care what you're about. Do you add competence? Do you add fun? Is it nice to have you there? St. Francis Yacht Club is it does more for diversity of the sport than anything U.S. Sailing can do. Balboa Yacht Club, the club where I'm a member down in Orange County, because they had a huge Asian population in Irvine. They got Asians in and out of Balboa Yacht Club. And you got a lot of Hispanics down there because of, being close to Mexico and Central and South America. So what? It's great. I don't know anybody precious few. And if they are, they're all older than I am, and they're mostly gone. Clubs, classes, local sailing organizations, community sailing programs like the very fine Sail Newport that Brad Reed runs at Newport, for example. Fabulous. For a mass of people not to be on the starting line, it is impossible to declare a champion. Good point, Fritz Miller. Ed Worley, keep politics out of our sport. Focus on getting everyone out on the water sailing. And who does that? The clubs, the classes, local sailing organizations. The Olympic team needs to follow the proven formula. Look at the Oz, the huge country, but they put together a squad system. John, yes, I believe a squad system is also necessary, but that also is going to work differently in Australia than it's going to work in the UK and so on. I'm looking at all these comments. Great job. Thanks, Lynn Shore. And I tell you what, I talked to Lynn Shore at length too. Lynn Jewel Shore is one of the great, she was the first women's gold medalist. She and who was your crew, Lynn? In what, Busan 90, what year was it? 96? No, it wasn't 96. It was before that, wasn't it? Lynn won a gold medal in the 470. Was it 88? And she is got great ideas. There's a lot of people with great ideas, but if people don't listen to all these people who've been around and have great ideas and listen to the volunteers and embrace the volunteers, in fact, turn the work, the major work of the organization back to the volunteers and the local organizations, then we'll continue as we are. We are screwed with a capital F if we don't do that, in my never so humble opinion. Okay, now we're going to ask in the corrector Crutonic thing. Not only is there crazy talk about taking the Olympic program and ring fencing it, taking it completely out of U.S. sailing, it's not going to happen, or at least not going to happen probably in my lifetime, because it'd be a long, ugly fight with U.S. OPC and U.S. sailing and so on. And it's never really been that way since the early 70s. Just keep U.S. sailing under, but have a firewall, have their own budget, their own staff. They can even do their own accounting. You don't have to centralize all that stuff in Bristol. Bristol doesn't have to be a bureaucracy that services everything in the sport. The more decentralized it is, the better, in fact. In fact, when you talk about, somebody just said, I go around sailed 10 or 15 different regattas, and the race management's always different. You know what? That's good. You get innovation. And I'll give you an example of that, of what happened in this country. The late, great Bill Benson, who was my predecessor as the one design director. I was hired to replace him, basically. Bill had the idea we're going to centralize and push everything from Evanston, Illinois, later Newport, Rhode Island, onto the classes, onto the clubs, and tell everybody how to run championships, how to run race management. He created a professional race management team called the Mobile Race Management Team, MRMT. Mobile Race Management Team, headed up by a couple of cool people maybe watching on here. And you could hire that Mobile Race Management Team to come in and run racing for your national championship at your club or at some other place where you were running it, a championship, but it was hugely expensive. And that thing lasted for about 2 years. In fact, when I was hired, the first thing I was told by the volunteers, by the board, you got to figure out how to shut that down because it's not cost effective, because it was a centralized bureaucracy trying to tell clubs, classes, and YRAs how to run race management. Forget it. Not only is that it cost ineffective and can't do it, you lose all of the creativity, you lose all of the diversity, you lose. Okay, I had this conversation with one of you on here yesterday. I'm going to repeat it. U.S. Sailing also used to have 2 meetings a year. Board of directors met, the committees met, including the Olympic Committee, the Offshore Committee, the Inshore Committee, the Olympic Committee, Training Committee, all met. They'd have their meetings. Chairs would go report to the board at the final meeting, and sometimes more often than that. The meetings are all open, except the executive committee if they're going to talk about salaries or personnel. Meetings are open. You could wander into the Olympic Sailing Committee, sit in the back of the room, and listen to all this conversation. And wow, that's Sam Merrick. Oh, that's Andy Kostanecki, Ding Schoonmaker. Oh, there's Lynn Jewell. There's Lynn Shore. Lynn Jewell. My God, there's Olympians in it. Buddy Melgus was there. Dennis Conner was there. The Offshore Committee had the Jim Kilroys and the Kumantaroses and the Ted Turners. They're all there because they were there giving input and making policy, taking votes at these committees, and then go and fight at the board. Well, this is what our committee wants to do. Well, I got to coordinate that with this committee, or what's the budgetary impact? Okay, we'll get it. And you could speak up at that, even if you weren't a member of the committee. You could put your hand up and say, excuse me, this is the way we do it in Southern California. Well, that's not the way it works in Lake Michigan, but yeah, that's an interesting thought. We'll go back and try it at Lake Michigan. Or that's never going to work. Thank you. Interesting. And if somebody, though, was smart and good and thoughtful, and they weren't a crouton, they weren't in there, blowing their own puffery up, and didn't have an ego, they weren't just showing off their ego and talking and there were people that did that, and those people they just got ignored. But if you were smart and good, you were on that committee the next meeting. Somebody'd say, hey, you got to come on this committee. You're smart. And then if they were really smart and good, and after a year or two, they might be chairman of the committee, and then they might be on the board, and then they might be an officer. So you had people that came from all over, and because they were smart and useful and creative and helping, they moved up in the organization. You'd have 2 meetings a year. One that when we were doing this, and I was running it in Chicago and alternating between Chicago and Dallas, so everybody could fly in at the spring meeting, mid-year, about this time of year. You'd have these meetings, everybody'd talk. And as one of you said yesterday, forget about the meetings. That was all interesting, exciting, and watch the votes and hear what this person said about that. And, you could go then to the bar and wander up next to Buddy Melgus and say, hey, Buddy, I heard you say this about that. Have you thought about this? Or what about that? Or, these are gods. These are super cool sailors. These are smart people. You could go up to Jim Kilroy and say, Jim, you really think that's what we should do with IOR Mark III? Well, have you thought about this? So that was how the meetings worked. That's all gone. The volunteers have been shut out. The diversity and the complexity of all of the people around the country coming together once or twice a year is gone. Because not only did we do it in the spring, we then did it again in October. Everybody came together. The committees met. The committees then went and reported to the board, including the Olympic Committee. Yeah, okay, if they're going to go off and had to meet in executive session because they had some problem with some coach or something, that's fine. Everybody has to do that. But otherwise, they were open, and people voted. And you could talk, even if you weren't a member of the committee. And you come back in October and say, hey, we tried that at our little, and I'm not talking about huge yacht clubs. I'm not talking just about New York, St. Francis, San Diego, Seattle, Chicago, Texas Corinthian, Southern, Lauderdale Yacht Club, Annapolis. I'm talking about my little club in Michigan where Clark Chapin and I grew up, which didn't even have a clubhouse really until the 90s. It existed perfectly well as a paper club out on the lake for 40 years. And there's lots of clubs like that. Do you think the ice boaters, that guy Ron Sherry we had on the show here, 3-4 weeks ago? If that? Do you think the ice boaters need U.S. Sailing to come tell them how to run ice boating? Oh, I shouldn't even say this because the U.S. Sailing will now put an ice boat department together. Excuse me. Those people know how to do it, and the last thing they need is somebody to come tell that guy who stands out there on the ice with a checkered flag how to run ice boat racing. No, in fact, we could probably go talk to them and learn a lot about what they do and apply it to grassroots sailing in this country beyond ice boating. We could do that. The U.S. Sailing is missing all that. They need to go back to 2 meetings a year. The volunteers need to run the place. There needs to be a small professional staff that supports the volunteers and cut the costs, cut the overhead, push the programs out to organizations, local and otherwise, that can run them better than U.S. Sailing, or at least as well, and probably better. And concentrate on rules, meaning racing rules, rating rules, and the Olympic program. Full stop. Okay, that's my simple prescription. Now, is it correct or Croutonic? Not only do people say you got to take Olympics out from underneath U.S. Sailing, it ain't going to happen, nor should it happen. Now, you could separate it, as I said, but should sailing come out of the Olympics? I don't think the question is correct or Croutonic sailing should come out of the Olympics. The problem is, are we going to keep sailing in the Olympics? Are we going to lose, is sailing to get pushed out the way Paralympic sailing has been pushed out of the Olympics? And if we're not careful and if we don't do a better job at the world sailing level and elsewise, we will get pushed out. And I submit to you, and this comes up once every 10, 15, 20 years. We had a big gazing at our navels when I was executive director back in the 80s. Oh, we got to take sailing out of the Olympics. We'll all be better off. We'll spend money, take that money and spend it on junior programs. No, that won't happen. The money won't exist. People aren't going to give money to U.S. Sailing to then go and spread it around to junior programs around the country. Excuse me. Precious little of that's going to happen. We need to keep sailing in the Olympics. We need to fight harder than ever. We need to rationalize our structures and what we're doing because we need the competition to elevate people, to make them stars in their own countries. Look at what the Olympics has done for women's sailing in particular. In a lot of countries that didn't have women's sailing, they now do because we have some women's classes, equal number of women's classes in the Olympics. And people want heroes. Gary Jepson wrote that article in Sailing World that appeared in the latest issue, or the latest online, on the latest website, saying, I was there talking to, Gary's older than I am, a couple of old farts by now. And he said, I was there someplace with some kids. None of them knew all the heroes, my heroes in the sport, the Buddy Melguses and the Ted Turners and the tell me who. Well, you know what, Gary? I read the article and he's right, and it's sad. But here's the reality. When I was those kids' age, I didn't know who Briggs Cunningham was. I didn't know who Harold Vanderbilt was, the guys from the 30s and the 50s. I didn't know who Bus Mossbacher was until I went to U.S. Sailing and joined New York Yacht Club, and then suddenly was going out doing fundraising talks with Commodore Mossbacher to raise money for the New York Yacht Club's America's Cup campaign. And, and I was in awe, as I should have been. So the people who we need to promote who are cool are Caleb Payne, are Terry Hutchinson, are this whole layer of people. And the only way you do that is with competition. The Championship of Champions used to be promoted in a big deal. U.S. Sailing ran the Championship of Champions, and whoever won that was a bit of a deal because took all the classes, the champions from those classes came together and raced. Good sailors, lots of good sailors. And somebody won it, and, they were a bit of a deal. You know what they're running the Championship of Champions in this year? U.S. Sailing is? This is a DEI play, I guarantee you. They're running it in RC, radio-controlled boats. Why don't we run it in ice boats? Why don't we run the Championship of Champions, take all the class champions from this great event, this great championship, which has been going on since the 70s, and go run it in ice boats just for the sake of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Come on, people. Okay. We got to keep the Olympics on. It would be completely Croutonic to take sailing out of the Olympics. We've been in there since the get-go, since 1896, okay, you can talk about it being canceled, no wind and no water down in St. Louis for 2004, but this is cool, this is great, and make it great again, the Olympics, including and especially in this country, by what I suggest we do, which is getting rid of this non-sailing CEO, redo the mission statement for the board, clean out all this other stuff that can be delegated to clubs, classes, and wire race. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm repeating. I'm off that topic. We go to a Bravo Zulu. I guess hold on, I'm going to stop here. There's so many comments. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. We're an hour and 25 minutes in, but yeah, James Bland, RC boats for the COC. Yeah, they're running it down there at Columbia Yacht Club there in Dallas. That's on White Rock, isn't it? Yeah, it's idiotic, James Bland. I'm telling you, it's DEI is run amok. Replying to John, Emmett, Gordon Smith, that's the fundraiser. Yeah, the fundraiser. Karen's raised $18 million. Tom, send them. I'm too old. I'm not doing this. I'll help. I'm going to rejoin the organization, and I'm going to harp on it here. And anyone that wants to come on and take issue with anything I've said or support anything I've said, you're welcome. I'll add a show if we have to. Julia and I will add a show. Right, Julia? She's upstairs in the Commodore suite. And John Emmett, with all due respect, and I love you to death, and I think you're doing a terrific job. What works in Australia and in the UK is not necessarily going to work in the US, and vice versa. But let's go take the best ideas from your squad of Deliverance and what they do. And remember, Australia is a federation too. They got strong states. Alistair, who's on here, will tell you. Grassroots, Alan. Yeah, take it back to the grassroots. Absolutely. Stingray, thank you for your University of North Texas coffee mugs. Now we have little geographic fiefdoms. I'm all in favor of geographic, not fiefdoms, but geographic groups that get together and talk about what works. And then trade best practices and don't trade worst practices. Steve Gruber, I think Tom even took my comment the wrong way. He was talking about having to sail under different race committees. Yeah, I don't think I took it the wrong way. I liked what you were saying. I should have said that I like race management diversity. At first, it increases the challenge, which I like, and I have brought many ideas back to my home club, making our racing better. Spot on. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that too, Steve Gruber. That's what works. Ian Barker helping. Thank you, Ian. A loss. Yeah, again, I don't think boycotting is the answer. I had a guy call me up who was I'm not going to mention his name, but he used to write a lot for Sailing Anarchy. I woke up to a text from him this morning. Got to boycott U.S. Sailing. Take them down. They're croutons. Yeah, these people inherited a structure that was flawed. These people are well-intended, well-meaning. They haven't had the background and experience that a lot of you on here have had, that they haven't grown up like I have with the organization since I was on the board at age 19, I think, and then went to work for them, and then was on the board again. But so I've seen it. I've seen it all. And I've seen what's happened. So a lot of others of you have done the same. Bravo Zulu. There is great stuff going on in our sport. We have a fabulous sport. And especially at the Masters level, especially in the laser class, John Emmett did some video from when he won his division at the ILCA 6 Masters World Championship in Thailand here not too long ago. Now the ILCA 7 Masters have concluded. Told you we'd talk about it. Tim Law won the great granddaddy, the great Grand Masters division. And Tim, of course, brother of the late, great Chris Law. And I don't know how old Tim is. He's got to be, how old is he? Somebody will know on here. Got to be, what, closing in on 70, if not? It's 65 plus. So Tim won the Great Grand Masters, which is the 65 plus division at the 2023 ILCA 7 Masters World Championship, hosted, as you all know that have been watching our regulars on here, hosted by the Royal Varuna in Pattaya, Thailand. Britain's Tim Law was the clear winner, finishing 5 points clear of Stephen Gunther of Australia, with Jeff Loosemore, also of Australia, in third place. The Australians did quite well in this championship, up and down. In fact, as they did in the ILCA 6. Here's the video. Beautiful video. Do you remember the first time you went to an international regatta, or even to a regatta off your own lake, out of your own home waters? What a fabulous experience. What a fantastic sport. We are so lucky. Bravo Zulu to the Royal Varuna. I want to go there sometime soon. John Emmett, I'm jealous that you were there. And bravo Zulu to the winners in the Masters. There weren't many, apprentice under 5, but Thailand has got all these kids that sail opties and are doing well in other classes. You got the Greeks, the Aussies, the Americans, the Italians, the UAE is there, more Aussies, and of course, Tim Law, the great Grandmaster with 23 entries. The Grandmaster had 38 entries, so fantastic. I don't know Andrew Holdsworth, I don't think, from the U.S., but it doesn't matter. We're celebrating all these people that did well at this championship, and bravo Zulu to them all. A couple other things we want to cover. We're an hour and 34 minutes into this one. We got to talk about for a minute this ocean race. I hope these 5 boats, we're down to 4, maybe to 3, as they're sailing toward Itajaí in Brazil. And it's we got one boat that's already turned around heading back to Cape Town. I hope they make it. They got some real problems. Another boat that has done a temporary, at least, kind of fixed to their mast that's split. Well, you'll see it in this video, the race report they issued today. Overnight, Team Wholesome PRB have consolidated. They're in a strong position. Yeah, last I looked, there's something like 600 nautical miles out in front. 11th Hour Racing are on starboard, heading south to cover the boats behind and reposition for the next weather system. Wholesome PRB caught the weather system, the others didn't.
We're sort of chasing the tail end of a low pressure, which we should have been able to just sit on for the next sort of three days effectively. And slowly but surely the boats have been falling off it, so Biotherm fell off first and Militia fell off. Definitely still in it and charging forward, so I think this is going to open up a pretty big gap in the fleet to him, which is pretty disappointing, but can't do much about it now.
So far on Lake 3, the fleet has taken a battering, but Team Militia are undaunted. Will Harris and team have been working hard to repair their damaged mast. Look at this. Had to stop, go aloft. They've got the repair kits, of course. Lots of different things. Team Wholesome PRB's lead will continue to extend, but the boats behind will be hopeful of new wind and an opportunity to catch up. After completing the repair, Team Militia can once again focus on racing.
Oh man.
Oh my god. That couldn't have gone better, I don't think.
That's the race report today for the ocean race as sailing around the world. And hopefully they're taking John Schaefer, who's on here, and as a FOSI and a bit of an offshore, more than a bit of an offshore expert, explaining that these boats are really not built, especially with the scow bows, to crash and crash and crash, and slowly but surely they delam, they become delaminated, and he's really worried that any of them will get around the track, and they have to know when to dial back, and have to be dialed back quite a bit. Here's the this was a couple 3 hours ago now. I took it about an hour before we went to air, and you can see that. Also, you can see them there in this way out ahead of the other boats. They caught a weather system, straight lining it across, and there is their more than 600 nautical mile lead. Team Militia behind Biotherm, and then 11th Hour Racing once again having troubles in the speed department, or so one hears. And Geo Environment has SUS. That's the code word for suspended. They are sus, as the kids would say, which generally means suspicious. You're sus, suspect. So that's the latest on the ocean race. Gets us to the D block. Yeah, James Bland, I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've already read your comment, but running the championship of champions. Who's, come on, U.S. sailing. RC boats, Alan Long saying, are so different from real sailing. If you guys want to return back, Graham Sweeney, if you want to return back to the homeland with our fantastic sailing organization, the Royal Yachting Association, just have a word with King Charles. I'm sure all will be forgiven. Well, maybe we could get Frogmore Cottage, too. I could have a place to live there since they've kicked Harry and Meghan out, but I guess they're putting Randy Andy in there. Whom I know. I don't know Hagan and Mary. Yeah, Harry and Meghan. Different skill sets from actual boats. James Frederick Bland couldn't agree more. Great, fun, but different. Yep, Ilka 7 are almost as good as Fins. Well, there's a quiet admission by James Bland. Yeah, we're talking about keel boats and about parasailing needing keel boats. But Julie Ahrens has got a really good comment here. What works best is when volunteers run, because volunteers run organizations better than any paid professional. They've been there. They understand better their experience than most people who are volunteers. What? I don't know. Oops, I thought I understood your comment. Shaylee, being a parent, got Quebec to reach you. Should you use your parents or grandparents? I don't know what that, oops, I lost you there. I thought you were going to say that volunteers, some organizations don't need volunteers, shouldn't have volunteers, need paid professionals. I don't want volunteers doing heart surgery or open heart surgery or brain surgery on me. As somebody texted me here during one of those videos, in fact, I won't say who it was, but, we don't want people flying our airplanes and running the FAA who don't have tremendous experience in those jobs. At least I don't. Okay. Lots of other comments. Grandmasters Ken Saban saying 65 years and above. Oh my God, I think I'm in good shape for 72. I just stay fixing boats. Great video. Yeah, it was. I'm not too wild about the music, but great stuff. Great comments. You have to go back. If Julia were here, she would remind us to go back and read all the comments. Josh Tozo, formerly of, he was a great staff member of U.S. Sailing. He's now with a boat builder and purveyor here in the States, West Coast Yachting. RC boats are cool, but if it is for DEI purposes, would think something like the 2.4 meter would be a better choice for the championship of champions. Absolutely right, Josh. Good point. Okay, let's go here. We're to the finish line, the last leg anyway, not quite to the finish line. And SailGP has, they're doing these nice videos. I like these videos a lot. And this one is, sorry, I didn't mean to go off this shot quite yet, but this one is, they're featuring the runner-up team, the skipper, the driver of the runner-up team, Pete Burling, and he may end up winning the whole thing. We shall see, but a nice video.
I'm Peter Burling from Tauranga in New Zealand. I first went sailing down in Tauranga, pretty young. I was about 8 years old when I first started getting into it. And my dad had done the most sailing. He sailed probably up to when he was about 18 and then didn't sail until actually my brother, who was a bit older than me, got into it. But yeah, then I was kind of getting dragged along and got into it from there. I got no idea what advice I'd give myself 10 years ago, but I think just to keep having fun, keep enjoying it, and just see where it takes you. Yeah, the first boat I ever had was actually called Jelly Tip. It didn't last very long. It was not the best boat, but yeah, good fun to learn with, and pretty chuck it up on the beach and do whatever. I'm not even sure I've had a real job, to be fair. I've done a lot of yachting, done a lot of little bits and pieces, but we'll never really say I've had a real job. So many cool spots for such different reasons. Small boats, obviously Lake Garda's always pretty special. On this circuit we've had some pretty amazing memories. Some cool, amazing cities like Chicago. I think the perfect conditions for sailing a F50 is anything windy enough that everyone's foiling. People always ask, who inspires you, and for me, it's any Kiwi doing cool things on the world stage. I'm not sure where I see myself in 10 years' time. Right now I'm really enjoying competing in this league and also splitting my time a little bit with the America's Cup. So, that's probably like a 5-year outlook. Just see where it takes me.
One of my heroes. I just think the world of Pete and Blair and Tommy Slingsby and, the rest of that gang. That's why I think SailGP is so good for the sport. I wish Jimmy Spithill would do better. I think it would lift sailing in this country. It would give kids something to point to and point at. I wish it were a recognized, Jim's now an American. And I'm over that, but I wish it were somebody, were Ed Baird, or it were Taylor Canfield, or somebody who was, born here and recognized widely as an American sailor. But it's a big world. Things are changing. New Zealand sail ground, and if the American team would just do better, if Jimmy would drag that team along, it would inspire a lot of kids, irrespective of him being originally from Australia. Sail. Grand Prix, the next one is, of course, in New Zealand, in Christchurch, the 18th and 19th of March. So just in a couple weeks' time, and I guess they're going to get the boats back together okay, or at least most of them. Maybe not the big wings, maybe the smaller wings for all the boats, but we shall see, and we'll be watching. That gets us to the rest of the D block here. I only have one, and again, it's apropos this show. And what we've been talking about, which is U.S. sailing, keep running the Olympic program, just push it off to the side, let them do their thing. And then U.S. sailing, refocus yourself. Let the clubs run the sport. Let the classes run the sport. Let the community sailing organizations do their thing. You focus on racing. Are they going to take me? I don't know. But this is what I feel like. This door also comes with the latest technology. We installed a facial recognition device. Some call it a peephole. You need a peephole into the inner workings of U.S. sailing. When was the last time they had a board meeting? You could all come in and sit, see what they were saying and how they were voting on. How do you get on the board? How do you run for president? It's all self-selected. It used to be that the clubs sent people to the YRAs. The YRAs sent people. The YRAs were groups of clubs in a region. And the classes would send people to the class council, and then they'd send people to the board, and, you'd nominate people. Wow. And then you'd vote. Clubs. The spiritual heart of the sport are the clubs and the classes and the peoples. Democracy. Okay, that's it. Sailing World. I love this finish line photo by Dave Reed, Newport Yacht Club. They're frostbiting a couple of years ago in the northeast corner of the harbor. Terrific stuff. Please like, follow, and share, as John Emmett said at the top of the show. We always say at the end of the show when Julia is here, she's doing better, still testing positive, but, often you do for 13, 14 days. Hopefully she'll be back down here at her desk next Tuesday, when we will next meet again. If you are so inclined, please support us. We and U.S. Sailing, instead of requiring people to be members, we never required people to be members. It was a voluntary thing. If you wanted to give a few bucks to U.S. Sailing, if you wanted to join as a member at the $30 or whatever it was then, $35 level, and if you wanted to give them $100, you could do that, but you weren't required to join. You're not required to be a patron. If you're so inclined, please become a patron. Patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated to keep us afloat. Give us a few bucks so that we can pay for our technology and internet connection and some food to put on the table here at the Beach Street Yacht Club. Thanks to all who gave us video, audio, images for today's show. I'm very pleased to report that a week from today, the 10th, a week from today, we will have live via Skype from, I guess, Sacramento, where they live, near Sacramento. We'll have Katie Pettibone and David Blanchfield Ratty, the two of them. And I've now got images that Katie sent me. They're almost too gory to put on the show, of David's leg. Remember, he was injured, Sydney Hobart, when a wave, I guess, came over the bow. He was up mid-bow doing something, got washed back, and his knee, just below, I guess, his knee, shroud, I don't know what, some shroud, some stay, baby stay or something, sliced through his leg down to the bone. And the pictures are gruesome. I'm not even sure I'll show them. But they're coming on. We're going to talk. Katie has got a lot of views about the Olympics. She's a very smart lady, a lawyer, very, very good sailor, longtime friend. And likewise, Ratty, I did a couple America's Cup maybe 3 campaigns with him. One of the best sailors in the world. And they're going to be on the show together. They're an item, and they will be on the show a week from today, live via Skype from Sacto. And a couple weeks on the 14th, we go, sadly, switching the clocks. And again, I'm happy to stay on daylight time. I'm happy to stay on standard time. Whatever we do, I wish we would stop the clock freeze the clock. And for your own local timing, we will continue to go live at 1300 Pacific. Right now we're Pacific Standard, but we will be springing ahead an hour on the 14th of March to daylight time, which means we will be live at 2000 UTC, 0700 an hour earlier in Sydney and 0900 in Auckland, until you all down there go off daylight time, and I'll let you figure that all out. Tuesday the 14th of March. We change time here. Hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for listening to this whole discussion about U.S. sailing. I hope you found it agreeable. I hope you thought it was correct. If not, welcome your comments, your input. The more input we get, the more views we get, the better off we will all be. Hope to see you on Tuesday. In the meantime, sail fast, sail safe, and have fun. Ciao for now.